A Neighbor's Choice. And welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski, your host. Happy to be with you in prime time, drive time across Central Florida, FM and AM. If you're listening now, make sure you set the dial. Wherever you're changing your station, you're flipping through, you want to set it right here each day to get the most interesting news and analysis in media today. Because we're a program that we get into physics, we get into economic policy, we get into the news stuff, we get into groupthink, we get into anthropology, we get into foreign policy, we get into everything that matters to the public. Because we bring on the real experts, people who are not afraid to challenge conventional wisdom. They're not afraid to go up against crowdthink, and they cut through the noise and deliver us information that's common sense, but it's not common in terms of the media. But that's okay. We're going to change that, and we rapidly are, because the truth has its own power. And what we have to do is unleash it and let it do its job and stand firm. Don't flinch when people say boo and they try to scare you like little gnats. The gnats, they might cast a shadow, but they're gnats. They're not really that big. And that's what the media likes us to do. They want us to all just surrender to whatever scandal they come up with. And boy, do they have another scandal that we want to take a look at today. And that's I honestly don't even read the story. I wouldn't even waste my time reading the New York Times. Just total state propaganda, pravda garbage, just total joke. I mean, the worst kind of blog you could imagine for most of the content. There was a time when I actually was that thought they were okay, but I don't think that's the time anymore. So we want to have someone who is one of our go-to friends for analyzing foreign policy news. He's someone with the Libertarian Institute, antiwar.com, and the host of the Scott Horton Show. Scott Horton, how's it going?
I'm doing really good, David. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, and it's always great to hear from you because I know you're going to call it like it is. You don't have Trump derangement syndrome, but you also don't worship Trump. You just analyze the news, and so with a particular focus on foreign policy. And I just wanted to have you on because I knew I could count on you to do. You're not going to sensationalize. You're going to look at the facts. You're going to look and see whether there's evidence behind these claims that the media is trumping up every minute into the news scandal. I mean, it's just one scandal. It's like they have a menu. They probably plan it out weeks ahead. All right, we're going to have a menu. Let's do a foreign policy scandal against Trump. Let's do this thing, or that thing, and then all the other little scandals are the things he does by his comments and tweets and so on. But there's this story that I guess Afghanistan, Russia has been trying to get bounties to Afghanistan to take out U.S. soldiers. And I guess it's based on the fact that they found cash in Afghanistan, so they just said it was Russia. What's the story here?
Yeah, well, so that's the follow-up. I mean, I'll start with, first of all, what your entire audience just heard at the top of the hour news is Democrats crying blah, 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 Joe Biden making accusations, and then the gigantic disclaimer, if true, if it turns out that these accusations are accurate, well, then that would be a real problem. Would, conditional on this actually being a real story. So the real question, David, is why are we even talking about this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, here's what happened. On the 26th, the New York Times put out a story by Charlie Savage and Eric Schmidt. The Wall Street Journal at the same time. The Washington Post followed up the next day. And all of them say the same thing, which is that anonymous intelligence officials, they won't even say what agency, tell them that there is an intelligence report that claims that the Russian GRU, their military intelligence service, may have paid some bounties to Afghan militants, again, very vague, to kill American soldiers. Well, in those stories, that's all they say. They are reporting that it is a fact that there is an intelligence report that exists, which makes these unproven claims. And then, but that's their hook for the news story, is that somewhere we are assured by our sources there is a piece of paper that says this on it. And then the next day, Charlie Savage from the New York Times and Warren Strobel, who I like to respect because he's done some really great work in the past, over at the Wall Street Journal now, and one of the guys from the Post, I forget, they all were tweeting each other, retweeting each other, talking about how they had confirmed each other's story, and that now we know it's true. When again, all that we know is a fact is that it is being reported that there is a rumor going around. David, I can confirm to you tonight that there is a rumor going around that the Russians may have paid some bounties to some Afghans to kill some Americans. Ahem. That is all we're talking about here. And even in the original New York Times story, they say that, oh, we have no details on this evidence at all. We don't know what we're talking about here. We're just saying that there is a report. And that, in fact, there's no connection between any particular death of any particular American soldier or Marine in Afghanistan that we are attributing to these alleged bounties. That's it. So we were talking about the most paper thin of accusations going around in a little echo chamber that amount to essentially nothing. And, you know, where the New York Times at least cited intelligence officials, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, we're citing people familiar. That's right. People familiar with what's going on around here are telling us this is the best that they could do. And meanwhile, the CIA and the Director of National Intelligence and the National Security Council are not confirming that. And today, in an important development, I'm skipping ahead here a second, but it's important. Today, the Wall Street Journal, and again, Warren Strobel, I'll give him credit for this. He's in a way eating some crow. The headline reads, NSA differed from CIA and others on Russia bounty intelligence. And so they won't say why. The National Security Agency won't say why they dissented. But the fact that they put this in the Wall Street Journal, that they dissented, I think itself is very powerful evidence that they really dissented, that they thought that this was not true. Not just that they weren't convinced, but they were convinced otherwise.
And they would know because they have all the phone calls and metadata, right?
Sure. I mean, they have access to every electronic piece of information on the planet, essentially. Yes, they do. And particularly when it comes to Afghanistan and Russia, for sure. And now, the New York Times, by the way, I want to mention this is important, I think, and I don't know exactly the reason behind this, but the New York Times has an Afghanistan reporter named Thomas Gibbons Neff, who is worthy of respect, who is a Marine Corps veteran of the Afghan war and writes some no-nonsense stuff about 99% of the time and does good work. Well, his byline was not on this piece, and I don't know why that is, but I sure would have liked to see how different that article would have been if Neff had been there to have to agree to it before it went out. But anyway, the next day they followed up in the New York Times, and they had a little bit of specifics about where they got the intelligence from, and you alluded to this. They said they busted some, again, militants. We don't know if they're Taliban or who they are, supposedly, and they had some cash, American cash. Oh, what a surprise. It's absolutely unfathomable that a militant would have American cash, except that, of course, the whole place is awash in black markets of every description, especially guns and drugs and, you know, money laundering of, you know, every kind of gangsterism you could imagine throughout that country on all sides.
So can you repeat that? You're saying that the evidence of this rumor is that these Afghanis had cash, American dollars?
Well, no. So then they say they turned these guys over then to the Afghan government. And they were then interrogated by the Afghan national security forces. I don't know if that's military or police, and then they say that these guys say that they got it from some Russians. And so, I mean, and I don't care what party you're in or how partisan you are, or whether you love or hate Trump or love or hate Obama or any kind of thing like that, has nothing to do with it. There's just no reason in the world that anyone should believe that this story is true.
Did they check the date on the dollars? Perhaps they meant the Russians from the Mujahideen days in the 70s and 80s. They kept it all those years.
Yeah. You know what? They wouldn't even have to do that because, in fact, the Americans have been paying the Taliban directly, literally billions of dollars, David, in protection money, essentially tax money,
right,
to the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, that is the Taliban shadow government there, for 10 years in order to, more than that, 12 years, 13 years, in order for them to provide protection for the Americans to transport their goods and their troops across the country. I don't know if people know this or not, but check the map. This is a country the size of Texas that's completely landlocked away not only from the Indian Ocean, but behind an entire mountain range. There's Pakistan, and then there's an entire mountain range on the border there. You have to go all the way up to the Khyber Pass and then across into Afghanistan with these convoys. That's why a gallon of gas costs however many $1,000, whatever it is. And the whole time, of course, the Taliban have to be bribed to even allow the stuff into the country, and whatever can't be delivered by plane to Bagram. And so America has been financing their own enemy in the Afghan war for the last 10 years. And I write about this in my book, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, where, in fact, one of these Taliban, it was actually the son of the Secretary of Defense, or the Defense Minister of Afghanistan. His son had his own little Blackwater private mercenary group that hired Taliban mercenaries to provide security for American convoys. And so the Taliban would drive security in front and behind the American military convoys, and this guy would cash in. And then he even opened up a lobbying group, or hired a lobbying group on K Street in Washington, D.C. to help push for the 2010 through 12, 13 Afghan surge in order to lobby for it, in order to keep his racket going.
Let's continue.
Of course, the Taliban take all this money and they buy all the best weapons and night vision and even Humvees and whatever they need from the Afghan National Security Forces that the Americans have built up there.
We're speaking with Scott Horton. We'll continue in just a moment to unpack this Afghanistan-Russia story that the media and their sycophantic worship of military-industrial interests continues to push and gaslight the public in a state of stupor. Let's continue to unpack this in just a moment on A Neighbor's Choice.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It can be devastating. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that will keep you informed throughout the entire process. That law firm is Catania & Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania & Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims do not even realize that they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to Catania & Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning over 28 years and family first. Catania & Catania, personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
The one thing that we've learned from an epidemic is that if we are healthy, we are far less likely to be susceptible to grave sickness. With that stated, stem cell activation is a big part of keeping ourselves healthy. By activating your own stem cells, you'll experience energy, better sleep, reduction in pain, and a support system that supports faster healing from wounds. LifeWave X39 patches are an easy, cost-affordable way to activate stem stem cells. Clinical studies demonstrate that LifeWave patches reset the genes in the body to a younger, healthier state. By wearing the daily patch, your body will activate the stem cells to give you benefits of a better way of living a healthy, productive life. Go to lifewave.com/B radio to see how you can elevate, activate, and regenerate your life with stem cell therapy. There's a special offer now with B Radio. The address again is lifewave.com/B radio. Live healthier and wiser with the X39 LifeWave patches at lifewave.com/B radio. Mom always told us to eat our fruits and veggies. Well, there's no better way to keep Mom happy than to take Fortify Organic Blue-Green Superfood. Studies indicate people who consume the most fruits and veggies each day are the healthiest with the best improved immune system. This product was created and designed by board-certified Dr. Michael Lang. You know him from the program Ask the Doctor. During this viral pandemic crisis, Dr. Lang recommends eating 10 servings of organic fruits and veggies a day, but this may not be realistic. This product produced by Dr. Lang has developed one of the first all-organic, gluten-free, and FODMAP-free superfood. It's called Fortify Organic Blue-Green Superfood. It's simple to take. Drink one serving a day to get 12 different superfoods. It's compatible for people with IBS since it's FODMAP-free. Perfect for anyone who needs a fruit and vegetable boost. Right now, Fortify is offering 25% off this superfood product. Go to Fortify.com. That's Fortify.com. Use promo code RADIO and receive the 25% discount. Eat healthy. Be healthy. Fortify.com. Keeping America fit and healthy during this time of precautionary change.
Neighbor's Choice returns. We're talking about the latest scandal du jour cooked up by the media and the Democratic Party, I guess, and some of the neocons at the top of the Republican Party. Mitch McConnell said in a news break, quote, that, Putin's always up to something, so we're looking into this. And it's just that constant gaslighting where it's hard to see how the American public has a chance at knowing the truth when, they're destroying and blocking. I mean, they deleted Daniel McAdams off of Twitter permanently because he made some, cut down of Sean Hannity. But, I mean, that's the same policy that they're doing to eliminate folks like, Daniel McAdams and who knows who else who speak out against our American foreign policy and how wasteful and how abusive it is and how destructive to our families at home and our economy and our standing with people around the world and just the degradation of human life that we're seeing continue. So, Scott, do you think, I'm here with Scott Horton of the Scott Horton Show, do you think that this is just timed because Trump is still trying to pull out more troops out of Afghanistan? This is just trying to sabotage that?
I certainly think that is the simplest explanation for what's going on here. Again, as we talked about, the story is so thin here. And, even for people who really respect the CIA and think of our intelligence agencies as here to protect us, even before themselves for the highest purposes and that kind of thing, you still got to admit they lie all the time. They're professional liars. That's what they do. And yes, the ends justify the means. They will lie. There's no reason that we are supposed to presume that they're telling the truth, especially when it's unnamed officials leaking to the usual suspects in this way. It's just, the burden of proof is by far on them. And look, just in this century, okay, they lied about Iraq's weapons. They lied about the impending genocide in Libya that they had to prevent. They lied about Syria's so-called moderate rebels who were just bin Ladenite terrorists who ended up creating the entire Islamic State. We had to go launch another war to destroy. And most recently, of course, they perpetrated the most incredible hoax that Donald Trump, of all people in the world, Donald Trump was a secret Manchurian candidate, compromised, blackmailed, controlled agent of Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin. And they pretended to investigate that for 3 years and made, tens of millions of people at least believe that it was true. Mm-hmm. And even to this day, And that was the CIA that did that, the CIA and the FBI Counterintelligence Division that framed up Donald Trump for treason, for the kind of treason that, would be equivalent to Benedict Arnold if it was true, which it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't get our benefit of the doubt. That's first. And then, of course, yes, they have an interest in doing this. It makes it where, as you've already seen in the media, the frame now is, if we leave, then that is Donald Trump again doing Putin's bidding, which is, again, a complete lie. It's a completely fraudulent way of framing the narrative, but that's the way that that's the way that they want to set it up. And so, but look at what happened to Donald Trump in 2017. It was exactly what they did to Barack Obama in 2008. Obama wanted to add a couple of divisions for a few months, this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And they steamrolled him into a full-scale escalation. They call it 30,000, but go back and check. They added 70,000 troops and brought American troop numbers up to 100,000 in the Afghan surge. And it was all politics. And they essentially just extorted Obama into doing it against his better judgment. I'm not sticking up for the man. I'm just saying that's the reality. Well, the exact same thing happened to Trump. And again, against his better judgment, too. He wanted out of Afghanistan all along. And as soon as he came into office, the first thing that happened was General Nicholson went and testified before John McCain's Senate committee saying, we need another few thousand troops right now, Senator, and all of this, which was seen, obviously, correctly, as a massive end run around the brand new president and his right to decide these priorities now. And so they steamrolled him, and they pushed all through the spring of 2017, and he put them off. And as long as he had Stephen Bannon there to help him, he put them off. But once Bannon was gone, they dragged him out to Camp David out in the woods by himself. You can see the pictures of the hostage situation out there, where it's all military officers and CIA men and Trump.
Wow.
All permanent deep state, national security state officials and him. And he's got he doesn't even have Jared there to translate or anything. And so he gave in and ordered an escalation of 10,000 troops, again, against his better judgment. And we know from all the reporting, and again, it's in my book, Fool's Errand, you can read all about it, that Mattis and McMaster, if they had their way, we would now be 3 years into their 4-year plan to escalate against the Taliban and only then begin to talk to them at around this time next year, when Donald Trump has had his government, Zalmay Khalilzad, over there negotiating with the Taliban for the last year and a half, and has a deal to get us out of there by the end of next May, essentially a year from now. And so there is an obvious motive. And the bottom line of it is the Pentagon wants to keep that Bagram air base come hell or high water or thermonuclear war no matter what. And it's no real interest of the United States. But to them, they fantasize that somehow it gives them some sort of strategic advantage against Iran or Russia or China, when it does no such thing. It's a piddly little base. I mean, it's not like we have nuclear weapons stored there and long-range bombers and things that would actually make a strategic difference in a real war against a real power. The whole thing is just a joke, but they won't give it up. They'll do anything to try to spin it.
I'm wondering if they really believe that that base is valuable, or if that's just the cover story for them to make a lot of money for the folks in the military-industrial complex.
There's a lot of that, too.
We'll continue in just a moment on A Neighbor's Choice.
Crazy things are happening.
You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up for what you believe is right.
But one thing is for sure.
You can't trust anybody.
For talk, news, and information, you can count on us.
Enough is enough. I mean, I almost blew a gasket.
Good for the country.
I know what I'm talking about. A lot of wackos out there.
Your connection to talk about it. The all-new News Talk 1040 WHP.
A number of states are reporting record numbers of COVID-19 hospitalizations. California has more than 6,100, and Governor Gavin Newsom says the percentage of residents testing positive is now almost 6%.
The framework for us is this: if you're not going to stay home and you're not going to wear masks in public, we have to enforce and we will, and we'll be making announcements on enforcement.
The nation's foremost infectious diseases expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, telling a Senate hearing today that he wouldn't be surprised to see the nation reach 100,000 cases a day. Lawmakers are putting pressure on the White House to respond to allegations that Russia offered bounties for killing U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany.
We are here today having this discussion because of an irresponsible, anonymous leak to the New York Times. There is no good scenario as a result of this New York Times report.
House Democrats say the briefing they received today on the matter was insufficient. Daria Albinray.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski here with Scott Horton of Libertarian Institute and antiwar.com, as well as the Scott Horton Show, where he analyzes foreign policy in a way that gets to the facts, breaks through the fake news, and gets to the truth of what we're doing as we continue an anti-American foreign policy that sells out the little middle class that we have left to, just Machiavellian, nihilistic type people. It's very disturbing. I want to ask you, Scott, when you see Joe Biden, when you see the media all come out and push for this narrative like lapdogs of military interests, and you see them do it about this Afghanistan story. Oh, look, Trump, you can't leave now. You can't, 20-something years, whatever. You can't leave yet, because we've got to do a twofer on you. Buy one, get one. We're going to resurrect the Russian hysteria, that racist, xenophobic Russia hysteria that they used for years. And then they're going to do a twofer because they're going to do that, and they're going to try to checkmate Trump from stopping the bombing of people of color in Afghanistan. So I said that intentionally because I want to get your take, Scott. We've been hearing the media talk about how we have to, get rid of capitalism. We have to, or do some, attack against private property owners, small business owners, and things like that, because that's the only way we're going to have racial justice. And these same voices are literally trying to gaslight the public to treat Trump as a traitor because he wants to get out of Afghanistan. He wants to kill less people of color in Afghanistan, and the media that tells us that Black Lives Matter and all this stuff is their whole mantra, they're saying, no, we want to keep killing people of color in Afghanistan. And how in the world is this not more of a topic? You get what I'm saying? I don't understand. It's like we always want to keep the foreign policy stuff away from the domestic stuff, and I see it as all the same. Okay, you care about people of color's lives? Yes, I do too. So why you want to keep Trump bombing people of color in Afghanistan?
Yeah. Well, frankly, nationalism is, a cousin of racism in a way where in the mind, it's all very subtle. It's usually not thought all the way through in English sentences with proper punctuation or whatever, but essentially foreigners are lowest than the lowest racial minority on the caste system. Natural, self-evident rights to life and liberty, that's for Americans. And especially if it's our government doing the killing of foreigners. Well, to complain about Americans who died in Iraq War II unnecessarily or fighting in Afghanistan unnecessarily, that's one thing. But to complain that somehow it's really a problem to kill the actual Afghans and Iraqis, come on. That's like some liberal, hippie, Democrat, feminist garbage or something. And that's the way it's framed, that is always an outlier position, that you would even be concerned about that at all. And in fact, it would be something feminine about you.
But in this case, though,
liberal about you.
But Scott, in this case,
of course, not true. The liberals, are the Democrats have been the most violent of all the presidents. Right.
That's what I'm saying. Is that in this case, it's the liberal media, CNN, New York Times, all the usual suspects, Joe Biden, all these folks coming out in unison saying, "Oh my goodness, what is Trump doing now? You can't leave Afghanistan now. Look. This is, this is a crisis. We're going to have to double down and keep on sanctioning and bombing people of color in Afghanistan." How come nobody can connect that? CNN with a straight face can lecture Americans and say, "You are shameful, disgusting, violent people for having Aunt Jemima syrup." And then the next segment is, Trump is a traitor because he doesn't want to keep killing brown people in Afghanistan. And they're like, how in the world can any thinking adult look at that trash media and say, I give them an ounce of respect or dignity when they have that massive amount of callous hypocrisy,
Yeah, hey, let's talk about the worst case, and it is absolutely the single worst thing going on the planet Earth right now, and that is America and Saudi's war in Yemen. And this is a war that Obama and Biden started in 2015 in conspiracy with Crown Prince Bonesaw over there, Mohammed bin Salman. And it is a war that from the very beginning has deliberately targeted the civilian infrastructure, the water, the sewage, the electricity, the hospitals, and even the farms, the grain silos, the flocks of sheep in the field, the irrigation systems, everything, the markets. They're doing everything they can to wage a medieval-style siege on the civilian population of the country of Yemen, a country that never attacked us, a regime in power that never threatened us. You might think that this is part of the war against al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, but no. This is the war for al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, against their worst enemies, the Houthis. AQAP are the guys that bombed the USS Cole in the year 2000, tried to blow up the underpants bomb on the plane over Detroit on Christmas Day 2009. They helped do the Charlie Hebdo attack and other major attacks. These are real bin Ladenite al-Qaeda terrorists there. And under America, Saudi, and the United Arab Emirates war, they have prospered unbelievably, seized entire towns and tax bases for years, military bases, armories. They're driving around. I know it's CNN, but it is credible reporting, driving around in American MRAP vehicles. And not like they stole in the way that ISIS did in Western Iraq. This is all American equipment that was given to them by the UAE, that was given to the UAE by the United States. And they have prospered beyond all belief. And this is, so it's a war that's genocide and treason. And Trump has continued it. Obama waged it for 2 years. Trump picked it up and has waged it for 3 more. And nobody cares about that. You want to talk about, minority, black or other minority lives matter and shouldn't be ignored when they're killed for no good reason. What's going on in Yemen right now is absolutely as bad as Iraq War II. Just because we don't have our entire Marine Corps on the ground there and our entire 3rd Infantry Division patrolling around like it was back then doesn't make the difference. It's the death toll on their side. And it's already over 250,000 people. 85,000 children have died under 5 years old. That's from Save the Children.
And that's how you know.
5,000 children.
Scott,
under 5
that's how you know that's how you know that the media is serving an ulterior agenda here, because what you just described is a perfect example of this. It's if they're all about just hating Trump for just the sake of it, which a lot of times they are,
right?
But if they're all for that, then this would be a picture-perfect scandal to shame Trump some more. Get some cameras over there, show the Yemeni children starving, show them suffering, and say that every day. Oh my goodness, this is the white supremacist dictator we always knew. Look at the photos of the Yemeni children. Oh my goodness, look at the suffering. This is all Trump. This is all Trump. If they wanted it, it's right in their hands. They do it all the time. But they don't. And that's what lets you know.
Started it.
Is that all it is? Is that all it is? It's just the Obama-Biden part? Is that the only thing stopping them from hanging this on Trump? Or is it that they just like this war because it's what their masters tell them they should like?
Well, yeah, it's both. But I mean, if the previous president had been a Republican and had been the one to start it, it would be a lot easier for them to attack Trump for it. But they have a major disincentive to do so now. But, listen, we need to get back to the Russia angle here, because an important dog barking that we're not talking about is why might Russia do this? Again, there's no evidence whatsoever that they did, no real reason to believe it. But take the hypothetical and say that, okay, why might Russia fund Mujahideen fighters to kill Americans? Well, why did Jimmy Carter fund the Mujahideen to kill Russians and to stir up trouble in Afghanistan back in 1979? Mm-hmm. And the answer, of course, was to bait them into overreaction and into invading the country and bogging themselves down, as Walter Slocum and Zbigniew Brzezinski said at the time, to give them their own Vietnam. We just did this massive self-inflicted wound in Vietnam. Let's see if we can bait them into doing that to them, quote unquote, themselves. And so Reagan continued the policy through the 80s. They made Rambo 3 about it. Everybody knows this is where Al-Qaeda came from, the Arabs who went to fight in Afghanistan against the Soviet invasion there. So then, if the Russians are paying the Mujahideen to snipe Americans, to provoke us into staying when Trump is negotiating our way out, and even to expanding the war, discrediting his policy, and giving energy to his adversaries in the American government who want to stay, well, then what does that say about our policy?
Right.
That the Russians want to see us stay.
Right.
And from the Americans' point of view, it's always got to be nefarious intent. It must be then to bleed us to bankruptcy, to destroy our empire the same way that we did to them. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, though, that's nonsense. There's no reason to believe in the world that they would do that. In fact, Russia helped George W. Bush invade Afghanistan in 2001, gave him access to all the Russian bases in the Stans, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan, and gave, the whole northern route in. And in 2012, when the Pakistanis closed the path through the Khyber Pass, they reopened the northwestern route so that Obama's, surge troops could go through Russia. It's not the Russians, it's the Americans who switched sides in the Afghan war. We used to back the Pashtun Mujahideen against the Soviet-backed Tajik communist regime in Kabul, to oversimplify it. But yeah, now that's the side we're on. We've been fighting for Russia's friends, the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, and the Hazaras in the north of the country against the Pashtun Mujahideen. Well, so the Russians have had that interest. They've supported our war not to bog us down and bleed us to bankruptcy and hurt us. They supported our war because we've been helping to provide their security, is the way that they look at it. And they have given money and weapons to the Kabul government, the Afghan government that the USA has created there. And in fact, and I write about this in my book, the Americans went to India and said, hey, India, this is in 2017. Will you please buy a bunch of Russian helicopters to give to the Afghan government for us? And we'll give you the money, but we can't get around our own sanctions on Russia. But our helicopters are too advanced. They can't fly them. They need Russian helicopters for the Afghan Air Force. Okay, so that's Russia's interests there. And there are reports, now they do talk to the Taliban, but so do we. We just cut a deal with them. They sent Zalmay Khalil's out over there to talk to them, so that's not anything. That's not negotiating with terrorists. These are homegrown militiamen in a shadow government, really a real government in half the country now, a force to be reckoned with, literally speaking. And if the Russians were to be giving them any support at all, David, it would be as a hedge, same as the Americans, as a hedge against what they call ISIS-K, or the new Islamic State group that is basically a bunch of Pakistani Taliban guys that came to Afghanistan and declared loyalty to the caliphate over there in Syria a few years ago. And these guys are more bin Ladenite and expansionist, and you could say Leninist and revolutionary in their outlook, where the Taliban are right-wing, conservatives. They want to consolidate their power in Afghanistan. They don't want to take over the world. these other guys have a much more bin Ladenite aspect. And so if the Americans are bugging out, then it makes perfect sense that the Russians would be helping the Taliban to fight ISIS, which they have and have fought them successfully over and over again.
We're speaking with Scott Horton of The Scott Horton Show and antiwar.com and the Libertarian Institute. We'll continue with more analysis of this Afghanistan-Russia story. Sounds like another fake news hit job on the American public. It's time to think clearly and reject the whole lot of this system of perpetual war and bankruptcy of the middle class. We'll continue in just a second. Hold on.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It can be devastating. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that will keep you informed throughout the entire process. That law firm is Catania & Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania & Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims do not even realize that they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to Catania & Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning over 28 years and family first. Catania & Catania, personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
Man, how can you afford gas for that big SUV? I pay less for gas than everyone else. I got the free Get Upside Gas app and get up to 25 cents a gallon cash back every time I buy gas.
Hold on. You're getting up to 25 cents off a gallon with the free Get Upside Gas app while I'm paying full price?
You know it. People earned over $1 million last year. You just got to take a picture of your gas receipt and bam, up to 25 cents a gallon cash back.
You don't have to tell me twice. I'm downloading the free Get Upside Gas app now.
Download the free Get Upside app now in the App Store or Google Play to save up to 25 cents a gallon when you buy gas. Use promo code TRUCK for a 20-cent a gallon bonus on your first tank. That's up to 45 cents a gallon on your next tank. Just download the free Get Upside app at the App Store or Google Play and use promo code TRUCK. Save money on gas on every fill-up. Download the free Get Upside app and use promo code TRUCK. That's TRUCK.
Bucks fans, here's a chance of a lifetime. For just $10, you can enter the ultimate raffle for the greatest game day experience ever. And it's all to benefit the Allstott Family Foundation and the Light Foundation. Mike Allstott and three-time Super Bowl champion Matt Light are inviting you to the Bucs-Saints game Sunday night, November 8th. It all starts with dinner with Matt and his lovely wife Susie at Island Way Grill the night before. On game day, you get 2 premium tickets, pre-game field passes, a tailgate party with Mike and Matt and their rowdy friends, 2 nights at the Clearwater Beach Hilton, a post-game meet and greet with Tom Brady, Drew Brees, the Gronk, and the A-Train. Plus, you'll get autographed jerseys from all 4, Brady, Brees, Gronk, and Allstott. A package like this went for $800,000, but you can get in for just $10. To enter, go to GameDayTampa.com. That's GameDayTampa.com. $10 gets you in. GameDayTampa.com.
Hello, David Gornoski here. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice. We're live. You can email me, david@aneighborschoice.com. That's david@aneighborschoice.com. I'm here with our special guest, foreign policy expert, Scott Horton, who we're going to get to his book, Fool's Errand, which talks about the Afghanistan war. But we've been talking about Afghanistan in relation to the full court press by the politically correct media, trying to attack the public and their desire to get out of Afghanistan by trying to do a twofer where you can try to resurrect Russia, xenophobic, racist hysteria against Trump, and also try to keep us embroiled into keeping troops to occupy people of color overseas. It's amazing when you just use the language of the garbage social justice fake movement. Just use their language and just speak truth. It just cripples the entire credibility of their stupid lies. and I've just had enough. I'm not going to allow the fake advocates of justice to keep gaslighting the public and have the audacity to try to take the moral high ground in the public discussion and say, oh, we stand for social justice and the destruction of hegemony. And then they go and shill for Joe Biden and the wars overseas. And it's just, give me a break. It's such a joke, such a garbage joke. And thankfully we have Scott Horton to settle the facts here as we can discern them. Scott, I want to ask you before we go to your book, can you give us any comments on if you've looked at the India-China story? Because that's something I've seen. They were talking about there was a skirmish at the border again, and then there was a news story out today that India has banned a bunch of apps and things, popular apps from China, just banned them completely from the country. Where do you see that story, and how does that affect America?
Well, first, let me say one word in defense of the leftists. I think people who are self-described progressives and to the left of them, socialists and various kinds of Marxists and whatever, are almost uniformly anti-imperialists and hate wars, and maybe oftentimes for somewhat the wrong reasons. They just blame capitalism in general for empire and that kind of thing, although there's some truth in the public-private partnership that is the American hegemony project. And they tend to hate Joe Biden's guts because Joe Biden is a Democrat leadership council, Bill Clintonite, to them, right-wing Democrat, which in fact is pretty fair. He and Strom Thurmond attacked Ronald Reagan for not having a tough enough war on crime and war on drugs back in the 1980s. That's been Biden's whole career. And so real leftists properly hate him, and for good reasons, for being a warmonger and he was the single most influential Democratic senator lying us into Iraq War II back in 2002 and 2003 in conspiracy with George W. Bush's administration, by the way. So the more left you get, the less loyal to the Democratic Party you are. And that's where real principle can be found. As Malcolm X said, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. Well, if you stand for anything, you'll at least see through some things. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I try to give them credit where it's due. On India and China, I'm far from an expert, but basically there's a border that is almost impossible to imagine way up in the Himalayas there. Essentially on a mountainside is where the invisible line is drawn. And I think somewhat officially the Chinese have been on the Indian side of what traditionally would have been the line maybe since 1960 something. But of course, both of these are brand new nation states in terms of independence from their empires after World War II and everything. So it's very unsettled. But the good news is that at least for now, there's nothing really to fight about. Now, there's freshwater resources up there that someday could very quickly turn into, a motive for real conflict. And, hopefully the different countries who rely on that fresh water can work out some sort of international consortium to deal with that peacefully. That could be a problem in the future. For now, fortunately, they don't have really anything to fight about other than pride. Mm-hmm. Although that can be a really big deal, of course, that some Indian soldiers get clubbed to death by some Chinese soldiers, which is apparently how this happened. These troops are disarmed so that they don't do anything crazy and shoot each other. So what do, they beat each other to death with rebar and with boards with nails through the end, like Mo Sizlak on The Simpsons. And then when this happens, the question is, how macho do the leaders on either side have to be? And I think the Chinese had been pretty conciliatory and mostly just silent about it and trying to de-escalate where the Indians were talking tough. That was the last I had seen. Mm-hmm. But these are both, nuclear powers. And countries do go to war over things as dumb or dumber than the loss of one squad that, may or may not have deliberately crossed an invisible line somewhere,
And how would that draw America if they did start having a hot war? What would that happen?
Well, I fear that in that situation, the Americans would threaten the Chinese that they better stop, and that then you'd have the same problem again. And the Chinese saying, "Well, who the hell are you to tell me what I got to do?" What are you going to do about it if I don't? And, you know, there's a fight that we need to not get in. And they're not as well armed as America or Russia, but they do have approximately 300 nukes, and that's enough to completely wipe out our civilization in an afternoon if it came down to it. The fact that we could kill all of them too is hardly a consolation, if you know what I mean.
Right. Well, let's talk about your book, Fool's Errand. Tell us a little bit about it and why it's an important read in this moment.
Well, listen, this is the one that's gone on the longest. And a lot of well-meaning people have participated in it as soldiers and, you know, working for the State Department and different, you know, media organizations and NGOs and whoever, trying to do their best for people here. But essentially, the price is not worth it. And the amount of bloodshed and, look, essentially, I talked before about the geography of the place. A country the size of Texas, landlocked in the middle of Asia. I mean, that ought to tell you everything you need to know right there. But also that this is the great, you know, the geography, the topography, mountains and deserts and badlands and, you know, wild lands, vast countrysides full of armed, angry, reactionary old farmers who don't like being occupied and never did back through the eons. And, you know, could America build a little city-state in Kabul? I guess. But to rule the entire country of Afghanistan? No. Absolutely they cannot. It cannot be done. And by the military's own estimates, if you just look at their charts, it would take 500,000 men occupying for another 25 to 30 years in order to, quote-unquote, pacify that land and turn it into what the Americans want it to be. And of course, even then, just saying it like that is all you need to know, that wouldn't work either. You know, this is a warrior culture. They like to fight. They have enough rifles. That's all there is to it. And the proof is in the pudding. Here we are. We got a Republican president saying, I'm withdrawing out of there. There's nothing more to be done here. The Taliban, in fact, are not terrorists. Well, actually, they do commit terrorist acts, and they're horrible B words. I'm not saying that, but they're not international bin Ladenite jihadists after us. They never have been. They may be ruthless, but they are the people of Afghanistan's problem. And so this hasn't really been a war on terrorism. It's been a counterinsurgency campaign or an anti-insurgency campaign, and a fruitless one against the plurality population of the country. The Pashtuns are 40% of the country, at least, and they have no other real political representation at all other than the Taliban. And they've made themselves clear they will not submit to our rule. And look, we're from the middle part of North America. It's crazy to think that we would rule them.
Well, there's
time to call it off. Long past.
If there's one thing we know for sure, I don't think that the Democratic media complex is going to be calling for defunding the police in Afghanistan. I don't think that's happening. But Scott Horton, it's a pleasure having you on the program. Check out Scott Horton's book, Fool's Errand, which details the Afghanistan situation and why it continues to persist long after its arguments passed away. And visit The Scott Horton Show or antiwar.com or the Libertarian Institute. Many places to find Scott. Thanks again, Scott.
Thank you.
I'm David Gornoski. Godspeed.